One pleasant evening, a young princess put on her bonnet and wooden shoes and went for a walk alone in a forest. As she wandered, she came upon a cool spring of water, which had a rose blooming in the center of it. She decided to sit down by the spring to rest for a while. In her hand, she held a golden ball, her favorite toy. She liked to throw the ball high into the air and catch it as it came down. After a while, she threw the ball so high that she couldn't catch it when it came back down. The ball bounced on the ground and rolled away, eventually falling into the spring. The princess looked down into the spring, but it was so deep that she couldn't see the bottom. She began to cry and said, "Oh no! If only I could get my ball back, I would give up all my beautiful clothes, jewels, and everything I own." As she was crying, a frog popped its head out of the water and asked, "Princess, why are you crying so sadly?" She replied, "Oh, what could you do for me, you ugly frog? My golden ball has fallen into the spring." The frog said, "I don't want your pearls, jewels, or fine clothes. But if you promise to love me, let me live with you, eat from your golden plate, and sleep in your bed, then I'll fetch your ball for you." The princess thought to herself, "This silly frog is talking nonsense. He could never get out of the spring and come to visit me, even if he could get my ball. So I'll just promise what he asks, and I'll get my ball back." So she told the frog, "All right, if you bring me my ball, I'll do everything you ask." The frog immediately dove into the water, and a little while later, he came back up with the ball in his mouth and placed it on the edge of the spring. Overjoyed to see her ball, the princess quickly grabbed it and ran off towards home, forgetting all about the frog. The frog called out after her, "Wait, princess. Take me with you, just like you promised." But she didn't stop to listen or look back. The next day, just as the princess had sat down to dinner, she heard a strange sound, tap, tap, splish, splash, as if something was coming up the marble staircase. Soon after, there was a soft knock on the door, and a small voice called out, "Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to your true love here. Remember the promise you and I made. By the fountain cool, in the greenwood shade." The princess ran to the door and opened it. To her surprise, there stood the frog, whom she had completely forgotten. She was so startled and frightened that she slammed the door shut and quickly returned to her seat. Her father, the king, saw how troubled she looked and asked her what was wrong. "There's a nasty frog at the door," she said, "who helped me retrieve my golden ball from the spring yesterday. I promised him he could live with me, thinking he could never actually leave the spring. But now he's here at the door, wanting to come in." Just then, the frog knocked again and called out, "Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to your true love here. Remember the promise you and I made. By the fountain cool, in the greenwood shade." The king told his daughter, "If you made a promise, you must keep it. Go and let him in." Reluctantly, the princess went to the door and let the frog inside. The frog hopped into the room, making his way, tap, tap, splish, splash, from one end to the other until he reached the table where the princess was sitting. "Please lift me up and place me on the chair next to you," said the frog. Although she didn't want to, the princess did as he asked and lifted the frog onto the chair. Then he said, "Now, move your plate closer to me so that I may eat from it." The princess obeyed, and the frog ate as much as he could from her plate. When he had finished eating, he said, "Now I'm tired. Carry me upstairs and put me in your bed." The princess was very unwilling, but she picked up the frog and placed him on the pillow of her own bed, where he slept the whole night. As soon as morning came, the frog jumped up and hopped downstairs before leaving the house. The princess thought to herself, "At last, he's gone, and I won't have to deal with him anymore." But she was wrong. That night, the same thing happened again. She heard the tap, tap, splish, splash sound, and soon the frog was knocking at the door and saying, "Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to your true love here. Remember the promise you and I made. By the fountain cool, in the greenwood shade." Once more, the princess let him in, and the frog slept on her pillow for the second night. And on the third night, the same thing happened again. But when the princess woke up the next morning, she was astonished to see that the frog had disappeared, and in his place stood a handsome prince, gazing at her with the most beautiful eyes she had ever seen. The prince explained to her that he had been enchanted by a spiteful fairy, who had turned him into a frog. The spell would only be broken when a princess took him out of the spring, allowed him to eat from her plate, and let him sleep in her bed for 3 nights. "You," said the prince, "have broken the cruel enchantment. Now, I only wish for you to come with me to my father's kingdom, where I will marry you and love you for the rest of your life." The young princess, of course, quickly agreed. As they were speaking, a magnificent coach pulled up, drawn by 8 splendid horses adorned with feathers and golden harnesses. Behind the coach rode the prince's faithful servant, Heinrich, who had grieved so deeply over his master's misfortunes during the enchantment that his heart had nearly burst. The prince and princess took leave of the king, got into the coach, and set off for the prince's kingdom. They traveled happily and joyfully, and upon reaching the kingdom, they lived in bliss for many, many years.